Under the reign of the Eighth Hung King, Van Long entered a phase in which collective memory began to be shaped more clearly through symbols. If earlier dynasties laid the foundations for labor, social organization, and spiritual life, this period marked the moment when those values were not only lived, but also made visible, carved, cast, and preserved in images that carried deep symbolic weight. Most prominent among these were the lock bird and the bronze drum. These two symbols did not exist separately, they merged into a unified worldview, reflecting how the people of Van Long understood humanity, community, and the cosmos. In the mindset of the Van Long inhabitants of this era, the lock bird was not simply a specific species of bird. It was a distilled image formed through generations of observing nature, birds following the rhythm of seasonal floods, birds appearing over rice fields, birds closely tied to rivers and the sky. The lock bird represented the ability to move between realms, between heaven and earth, between water and air, between the visible human world and the invisible realm of spirits and ancestors. For this reason, the lock bird was not a symbol of aggressive power, but of guidance, connection, and protection. During the reign of the Eighth Hung King, the image of the lock bird became increasingly present in spiritual life. It existed not only in oral traditions and rituals, but was also directly engraved and cast onto important objects, most notably bronze drums. On the surface of these drums, the lock bird was often depicted in flight with long wings, extended necks, and forward-facing beaks. This posture did not suggest attack or domination, but rather a steady, enduring motion, like an unbroken journey of life itself. In the sensibility of the Van Long people, the lock bird was never a specific species one could encounter in everyday life. It was the crystallization of many layers of observation and imagination accumulated over generations. Living amid rivers, rice fields, and an open sky, early communities saw birds as the only beings capable of freely traversing spaces that humans could access only in fragments, soaring through the heavens, descending onto water, resting on the edges of cultivated land, then rising again into the air. This ability to move seamlessly between realms made the lock bird a powerful symbol of connection among the three fundamental domains of the ancient Vietnamese worldview: sky, earth, and water. For this reason, the lock bird was never depicted as fierce or predatory. On bronze drums and ritual artifacts, it appears with a slender body, an elongated neck stretching forward, and wings fully extended in a posture of steady flight. This is not the image of sudden explosion or aggressive motion, but of sustained, rhythmic movement, much like the continuous flow of life itself. The image reflects a profound philosophy of Van Long society. True strength does not lie in the fastest strike, but in the ability to maintain harmony and balance over time. In spiritual life, the lock bird was closely associated with the idea of guidance. The people of Van Long believed that ancestors did not completely depart from this world, but existed in another layer of reality, still observing and orienting their descendants. With its capacity to move between different planes of existence, the lock bird became the ideal intermediary for this belief. It was not a supreme deity, but a messenger, a sign that humans were not alone in the universe. When the lock bird appeared on a bronze drum, in ritual space, or in oral tradition, people sensed the presence of the past walking alongside the present. Significantly, the lock bird never appears in isolation. On bronze drums, it is almost always shown flying in groups, circling the sun or the central axis of the drum. This composition reveals a clear social consciousness. No individual exists apart from the collective. Each bird follows its own trajectory, yet all move within a shared orbit. This is a visual expression of Van Long's social order, where individuality is acknowledged but always embedded within the larger community and the cosmic whole.
The lockbird also embodies a cyclical perception of time. Unlike later linear historical thinking, the people of Van Long experienced time through agricultural seasons, rising and receding waters, and recurring festivals. Migratory birds, appearing and disappearing with the seasons, became natural markers of return. Thus, the lockbird did not symbolize a beginning or an end, but continuity itself. To depart and to return, to travel far without losing one's origin, this was the rhythm of life Van Long aspired to maintain. In the rituals of the Eighth Hung King Dynasty, the image of the lockbird was closely associated with moments of transition, the start of planting, the end of harvest, rain-invoking ceremonies, and ancestral commemorations. When the bronze drum sounded, its resonance was not only a call for people to gather, but was understood as a call to the lockbird, a call to re-establish the link between the visible world and the invisible one. Rituals were not meant to command nature, but to restore harmony between human life and the cosmic order. At a deeper social level, the lockbird also reflected how Van Long conceived of power. Ideal authority was not static and elevated above all else, but dynamic, constantly in motion to preserve balance. The Hung King during this period was not imagined as a tyrant or a perpetual warrior, but as a stabilizing center, ensuring that the community's orbit did not fall out of rhythm. The lockbird circling the drum's center became a metaphor for this relationship. Power exists to sustain harmonious movement, not to impose immobility. Notably, the symbol of the lockbird was never closed or exclusionary. A bird that flies is, by nature, capable of leaving familiar territory. This reflects an early openness in Van Long's society towards the outside world. Contact did not imply loss of identity. On the contrary, only with a firm axis, symbolized by the lockbird, could external engagement occur without cultural dissolution. The bird flies far but keeps its direction, just as a community may interact with others without losing its core. In oral traditions emerging during this era, the lockbird rarely appears in stories of dramatic conflict. Instead, it functions as a sign, a reminder, a background presence. This quiet role is essential. The lockbird does not intervene or act on humanity's behalf. It offers orientation rather than resolution. This reflects a significant evolution in thought. Humans accept responsibility for action while maintaining a spiritual connection to deeper origins beyond themselves. Aesthetically, the lockbird demonstrates the high level of abstraction achieved by Van Long art. It is not rendered with detailed realism, but reduced to powerful symbolic lines. This very simplification allows the image to transcend time. Thousands of years later, modern viewers can still immediately recognize the lockbird because it is not bound to a specific form, but embodies an enduring idea. Looking across the full arc of the Eighth Hung King Dynasty, the lockbird can be seen as its most concentrated symbol. It gathers everything Van Long had experienced: survival, conflict, stability, creativity, and self-awareness. The lockbird does not tell a single story, but ensures that all stories can continue to be told. And in its endless flight, ancient Vietnamese history found a way to endure, not through writing, not through rigid chronologies, but through the lasting power of symbol.
Under the reign of the Eighth Hung King, when the image of the lockbird had already become a familiar embodiment of the Van Long spirit, the bronze drum entered the most mature phase of its role. It was no longer merely a ritual object or a product of refined craftsmanship, but a central point where collective memory, spiritual authority, and the rhythm of society converged. If the lockbird symbolized flight, then the bronze drum was where sound arose, where invisible movement became audible, and where the community could hear itself. To the people of Van Long, the bronze drum was never an inanimate object. From the very first moment when molten bronze was poured into the mold, the drum was regarded as a forming entity,
carrying within it the breath of fire, the weight of metal, the patience of human hands, and the witness of the divine. Casting a drum was not a purely technical act, but a major social event in which the entire community participated, waited, and shared responsibility. For this reason, a bronze drum never belonged to an individual, it belonged to the village, the region, and the broader cultural space. The form of the bronze drum in this period reached a rare state of balance. The wide, flat drumhead became a gathering place for symbols. The sun at the center, lac birds flying in circles, humans, boats, stilthasses, and geometric motifs. Yet the significance lay not in each image individually, but in their arrangement within concentric circles. This composition reflected a very clear worldview. There was no absolute beginning, no permanent end. Every movement revolved around a sacred central axis. At the center of the drumhead usually appeared the sun, a symbol of life, time, and cosmic order, but the sun on the bronze drum did not radiate overwhelming, dominating power. It existed as a point of reference, a steady rhythm around which all else revolved. The lac birds circling the sun did not express worship of a distant authority, but the maintenance of harmony among elements. This perspective differs markedly from many other ancient civilizations, where the center often signified absolute power. In Van Long, the center was rhythm, not command. Sound was what truly made the bronze drum come alive. When struck, the drum did not merely produce noise, it created space. Its sound traveled far across water surfaces, through rice fields and into forests and mountains, connecting people who could not see one another, but who shared the same rhythm. This capacity made the bronze drum the most powerful instrument of communal cohesion. A single beat could summon a festival, signal an agricultural season, warn of danger, or open an important ritual. Yet the drum was never sounded casually. Every strike carried profound spiritual responsibility. During the Eighth Hung King's reign, the right to strike the drum did not belong to whoever was strongest, but to those whom the community trusted most. This might be a village elder, a ritual leader, or the drum keeper, a role that combined technical skill with moral authority. The drum keeper not only knew how to strike the correct rhythm, but also when to remain silent. The drum's silence was as important as its sound. This reflected a deep understanding. Not every moment requires a signal, and the overuse of sound could disrupt the community's spiritual order. Although closely tied to ritual, the bronze drum was never detached from everyday life. On the contrary, ritual was how Van Long infused life with meaning. When the drums sounded in rain-invoking ceremonies, it was not a demand for nature's submission, but a reminder of humanity's mutual dependence with heaven and earth. When it sounded in ancestral remembrance rituals, the sound did not call the dead back, but affirmed that the flow of memory had never been broken. The bronze drum also clearly reflected the social structure of Van Long. On its surface, human figures usually appeared in collective activities, dancing, rowing boats, participating in ceremonies. Rarely did individual figures stand out or become exaggerated. This suggests a society that did not glorify heroic individuals separated from the community. Even the Hung King, in the symbolic language of the bronze drum, did not appear as a visibly dominating ruler, but as part of a shared order sustained through ritual and rhythm. In this sense, the bronze drum functioned as a form of memory without writing. Repeated patterns and images passed down through generations were not mere decoration, but instruments of remembrance. Each generation, looking upon the drum, encountered familiar imagery, and through the explanations of elders, learned how to understand the world. This was a unique method of preserving knowledge, one that was inseparable from ritual, not frozen in text, but continually reactivated whenever the drum was sounded. Within the context of the Eighth Hung King's reign, as interactions between regions became increasingly extensive, the bronze drum also served as a marker of cultural identity. While details might differ from place to place, the overall structure and spirit remained consistent. This allowed different communities to recognize one another as belonging to the shared cultural space of Van Long, even if they had never met. In this way, the bronze drum functioned as a wordless language, transcending dialects and geographic distance. At the level of collective psychology, the bronze drum provided a deep sense of security. Knowing that a drum stood at the center of the village and knowing that the community could be summoned by a shared rhythm when necessary allowed people to live with greater calm. They did not need to remain in a constant state of alert because order had been embedded into their living space through symbol and sound. This was a highly refined form of social organization, one in which control arose not from coercion but from consensus and ingrained spiritual habit. From a modern perspective, especially for audiences in the United States and Europe, the bronze drum of Van Long can be compared to church bells, ceremonial drums of indigenous American cultures, or sacred instruments in many ancient civilizations. Yet the fundamental difference lies here. The bronze drum did not belong to a separate religious institution, but existed within everyday communal life. It did not rigidly divide sacred and secular spaces, but allowed them to overlap. By the later stage of the Eighth Hung King's reign, the bronze drum was no longer only a present object, but had begun to be understood as heritage. The people of Van Long were aware that these drums would outlast individual lifetimes, and they treated them with particular care. Drums were stored respectfully, used on appropriate occasions, and passed down together with stories and unwritten conventions. From this point onward, the bronze drum transcended its ritual function to become a symbol across time. And as ancient Vietnamese history continued to move into more complex phases, marked by greater contact, tension, and transformation, the sound of the bronze drum from the Hung King's era continued to resonate in the deeper layers of memory, not as a specific sound, but as an underlying rhythm, the rhythm of community, harmony, and the ability to endure change without losing oneself. The bronze drum, therefore, does not merely tell the story of a single dynasty, it tells the story of how humans can organize a resilient spiritual life without written language or coercive power.